non-alignment was basically a foreign policy that was followed by a group of countries who are not willing to be part of any of the two blocks which was headed by two superpowers during the Cold War time. After the Second World War in 1945, from 1947 till 1991, in the geopolitics, it was said to be a time of what is called as Cold War. There were two major powers and there were two ideologies across the world. One is the capitalist ideologies led by USA and certain other Western countries. And on the other side, the Eastern countries who believed in the idea of communism led by the erstwhile USSR. And this was considered to be an era of Cold War because there was no direct confrontation between these two countries, USA on the one hand and USSR on the other hand. But the confrontation was majorly ideological in nature. The confrontation was in the form of proxy war. But however, most of the countries at that point of time, they either aligned with the ideology of capitalism, the Western capitalism led by USA, and the Eastern communism which is led by what is called as USSR. It is at this juncture, there were certain countries which became independent, especially in Asia and in Africa. And most of these countries were subject to exploitation by the capitalist powers. And they've gone through a lot of phases where they were exploited. And in the background of all these things, many of these countries, when they become independent, they wanted to exercise a sovereign foreign policy. And they believed firmly that it is only this sovereign foreign policy which could help them to address the economic issues, would help them to have peaceful relation with their neighbors, and also to address the various issues at the international level. And at this juncture, these countries came together and they formed what is called as non-aligned movement. If you see the genesis of this non-aligned movement, it can be traced to the Bandung conference which happened in 1955 in Indonesia. In fact, in this conference, a lot of independent countries from Asia and Africa came together, and they believed in the theme of what is called as world peace, progress, disarmament, mutual respect. So this was a message that was spread through this Bandung conference. But however, the first summit of non-aligned movement happened in Belgrade, Yugoslavia in 1961. India was one of the founding member of non-aligned movement. India was not only a founding member, but India was also seen as a leader of the non-aligned movement and non-alignment as a foreign policy for the newly independent states who are not willing to join either with any of the superpowers. Along with India, certain other countries were also the founding members, which include countries like Yugoslavia, Egypt, Ghana, and of course Indonesia. So there were 5 founding members, but however today Yugoslavia do not exist because lot of ethnic conflict has happened and itself has disintegrated today. But however, as I already said, India was seen as the leader of this particular group. Personally, because of the stature of the first Prime Minister of India, Mr. Nehru. As we already discussed in the previous episode, that any foreign policy of a country, including India, will be driven by 3 important factors. One is the personal factor, the national factor, and the systemic factors. So when we discuss non-alignment as a foreign policy, it was also influenced by all these 3 factors in our country. Now one is the personal factor, which means basically because of the leaders of that particular point of time and the values that they believe in, that strongly motivated them to have certain foreign policies. If you look into the personality of Mr. Nehru, who believed in the idea of what is called as peaceful coexistence, he believed in the idea of disarmament, he believed in the idea of mutual respect, he believed in economic cooperation. So therefore, he was firmly of the view that if India is to develop over a period of time, if India is to address all the issues in our country, and India itself was subject to colonization by the superpowers. And hence the only way out of it is by following what is called as non-alignment. It is better in the interest of our country and his personal views that India should have an independent foreign policy rather than being a mere puppet in the hands of the superpowers. So it is these personal factors that propelled India towards what is called as non-alignment. It is not only his personal factors but also the national interest. The major issue India had at the time of independence is poverty and the need for economic development. And the national interest also propelled India to have what is called as non-alignment, because it is better India to be non-aligned so that it can grow economically well. And it is not only because of the national as well as the personal factors, but the systemic factors also played a very important role in India to have what is called as non-aligned as a foreign policy or non-alignment as a foreign policy. And these systematic factors include a lot of independent countries at that point of time. Lot of countries came out of colonization, they become newly independent state. And they're also having similar aspirations and turning to India as a leader. So therefore, this also propelled India to go for what is called as non-alignment. So you can very clearly see after independence, India wanted to exercise its sovereign power and of course its own independent foreign policy, where the founding principle of India's foreign policy was non-alignment. And this policy continued till 1962. And in 1962, we all know that there was a Chinese aggression. 1962, India unfortunately lost the war with China. And this is when the India's foreign policy drifted slightly from the stated policy of what is called as non-alignment. In fact, till this point of time, according to the experts, nobody questioned the foreign policy of Mr. Nehru within the party or even outside the party to a large extent. But there was a lot of criticism after India lost the Chinese war in 1962, because many of the people within the Congress party and in the opposition party felt that one of the reasons that India lost the war with Chinese during the Chinese aggression in 1962 was majorly because of the non-aligned policy. And with regard to the non-alignment, where Mr. Nehru believed in the idea of peace, progress, and mutual cooperation and trust with the foreign countries, it was also part of his belief that naturally he believed in reduced defense expenditure. So the critics said that one of the reasons that Indian army was not modernized because of the reduced budget allocation, which goes in line with the policy of non-alignment. And not only this, because of the non-alignment, India could not have any strategic partner who could have defended India during the war. So all these things have led to what is called as the loss of India in the war. And therefore, this is a starting point where India started gradually drifting from the policy of non-alignment. And then subsequently, India moved towards USA, although India has not officially said that it has given up the policy of non-alignment. But however, after 1962, it was not just non-alignment which was the policy, but primarily the national interest was given a lot of importance. And therefore, in line with the national interest of our country, India's foreign policy was gradually drifting in favor of USSR. And India started getting military aid as well as economic aid from USSR, although it has not completely given up what is called as the stated policy of non-alignment. But however, a turning point happened in 1971 on the backdrop of India-Pakistan war, which led to the liberation of the state of Bangladesh, where Prime Minister Indira Gandhi was instrumental in signing what is called as Indo-Soviet Peace, Friendship and Cooperation Agreement. And in fact, after this particular agreement, it was seen that India to be closer to what is called as the erstwhile USSR. So it further drifted India's foreign policy from the non-alignment, because we have already seen non-alignment means being neutral and not to align with any of the superpowers especially. On the one side it is USA, on the other side the USSR. But however, because of the compelling reasons and because of the national interest, India had to move closer to what is called as USSR. Now, the basic criticism of the non-alignment is it is because of the non-alignment India has suffered a strategic isolation for decades when it comes to number of international issues. Be it the Korean War, be it Vietnam War, there were not much takers of what India had to say at the international level, because India basically followed what is called as the policy of non-alignment. This was seen as one of the major criticism of non-alignment. And of course, the policy of non-alignment was also not going well with modernization of India's defense, Indian defense. And these can be said to be the criticism of what is called as the non-alignment movement. But it doesn't mean that India did not have anything to gain from the policy of non-alignment. In fact, the policy of non-alignment, in the opinion of some of the experts, have elevated the strategic position of India in the world, especially among the third world countries. The third world countries were looking forward for someone to stand against, if not against the superpowers, but at least to have an independent foreign policy. And India was seen as a leader among the third world countries. So therefore, the natural advantage is, yes, it has elevated the status of India at the global level. But of course, it had its own side effects, as you already seen. But however, it was from 1991. Now, India's foreign policy has gradually moved away from the policy of non-alignment. And 1991 till this point of time, now we majorly follow the principle of what is called as national interest, and along with what is called as strategic autonomy. And of course, we also follow the principle of what is called as multi-alignment. Although we do not align with a particular group, presently if you see, we do not align with a particular country alone, but India, whenever it is required, it will have strategic partnership, be it bilateral relationship, be it multilateral relationship, be it part of regional grouping. So that is what that dominates India's foreign policy today. India's foreign policy today is propelled by two factors majorly. One is national interest, another is multi-alignment, and what is called as strategic autonomy. As we'll continue in the coming classes, we'll try to understand as to how India's foreign policy is still evolving by following the principle of national interest, multiple alignment and strategic autonomy, and especially along with its neighbors and certain other important bilateral relationship with important countries across the world. So as we'll proceed in this particular episode, in this series, we'll try to understand first with India and its neighbors. We'll pick up the important neighbors one by one, and we'll try to understand India's relation with its neighbors, and then we'll move on to certain other important countries in terms of their bilateral relationship as well. That is for today in this particular episode. We'll again meet with India and its neighbors in the next episode. Thank you very much and all the very best.